Good morning. Mr Castleton.
Thank you, Your Honour. Your Honour, this is the inquiry into the Duns Road fire, Ellerslie Range, in the Snowy Valleys local government area, encompassed within the lands of the Ngarigo people. Your Honour, this fire burned for approximately 7 weeks and damaged an area of approximately 334,000 hectares. At least 1,024 structures were destroyed or damaged in connection with this fire, including the Selwyn Snow Resort and many homes in Batlow, Coonamah, Tumbarumba, Wandalga and Yaven Creek. The township of Batlow was particularly devastated, Your Honour. It is important to note also that David Harrison died on the 4th of January 2020 in the Duns Road fire near Batlow. His inquest will be held tomorrow. Your Honour, this is also the inquiry into the East Ernie Creek fire, Ellerslie Range, in the Snowy Valleys local government area, also encompassed within the lands of the Ngarigo people. This fire burned for approximately 2 weeks and damaged an area of approximately 407 hectares. At least one home was destroyed or damaged in connection with this fire. Your Honour, I just have displayed on the screen now a satellite image of the general area, and we'll just slowly zoom in just so Your Honour has an appreciation of precisely what part of southern New South Wales these two fires occurred in. We'll just wait for that to load so it's a little clearer. If we just scroll down a little bit, we'll hopefully see the Ellerslie Ranges, which is where the Duns Road fire commenced, where the cursor's circling around that blue marker, which represents a lightning strike, which Your Honour will come to hear about shortly. And then further south of that is the East Ernie Creek fire, where there were a number of lightning strikes observed on the 31st of December 2019. So essentially the area is in and around that Batlow area, Tarcutta to the west. Your Honour will hear from Detective Senior Constable Peter Alexander, the officer in charge of the investigation into both of these fires. The evidence will likely show that the Duns Road fire was started by a lightning strike on the 27th of December 2019 in a private pine plantation known as Takajo near Adelong in the Snowy Valleys local government area. This property is in the Ellerslie Range, approximately 1.5 kilometres to the east of O'Byrne Ellerslie Fire Trail. Your Honour, I'll have now displayed a further map which shows that general area of origin in the top left-hand corner, slightly to the east of Tarcutta and slightly to the west of Adelong. Investigating police consider there were 2 significant lightning strikes at 11:50 p.m. and 11:55 p.m. on the night of the 27th of December 2019. These strikes were part of a large thunderstorm that hit the southern slopes of New South Wales on this day. Your Honour, I have now displayed a map which demonstrates the extent of that lightning that hit that part of southern New South Wales. And Your Honour will see, and Your Honour will receive evidence of this, Your Honour will see on that map the numbers 1, 2 and 3. Those 3 lightning strikes were of particular interest to fire investigators. Essentially, 2 and 3 were excluded as a possible cause of ignition for the Duns Road fire, and 1 was considered the more likely lightning strike by reference to a particular tree that was burnt that appeared to be consistent with a lightning strike. The area of origin is on a privately owned pine plantation named Takajo in the Ellerslie Range. The property is owned by Snowy Mountain Forestry and managed by Hume Forests Limited. The particular area of origin of the fire was not in a plantation, but was an area of retained native vegetation consisting of red stringy bark, red box and longleaf box forest trees. The fire was first observed by two separate witnesses, Bruce Angel and Stuart Burbidge. Bruce Angel is an RFS member and at the time was captain of the Tarcutta Brigade. On the day the fire started, he travelled to Wagga Wagga and then returned to his property, Brula, in Tarcutta. During his trip, he saw the storm pass over the Ellerslie Range and became concerned about potential bushfires. At 12 p.m. on 28 December, he and his wife travelled to their son's house in the local area. On arrival, they saw a column of smoke rising from the northeast in the Ellerslie Ranges. At 12:07 p.m, Bruce took a photo of the smoke. He then called the RFS and 000. I'll just have brought up a photograph that Mr. Angel took on that day. And you can see in the distance a plume of smoke. Now, by about this stage, Your Honour, there's a period of about 12 hours that has elapsed from when the lightning strikes were first recorded at about 11:50 or 11:55 p.m. to when this photo was taken, which was about midday the following day on the 28th of December. At 12:15 p.m, another witness, Stuart Burbidge, was told by his wife that there was smoke coming from the Ellerslie Ranges. Stuart owns the property Connemara in Tarcutta and is also a member of the local RFS. He's attached to the O'Byrne Creek Brigade. Stuart immediately called 000. Both Bruce and Stuart independently and immediately attended the location of the fire in their respective RFS vehicles. Bruce Angel says that on arrival he observed the fire burning in the area of the pine plantation on the eastern side of the range, and the main front was travelling in a southern direction. Stuart Burbidge drove to the O'Byrne Creek RFS shed, caught his crew and drove in their vehicle to the Ellerslie Range. On arrival at the fire, they estimated it had burned an area of approximately 3 to 5 kilometres. They drove to the western side of the fire and observed flames 50 metres into the air. I'll just have now shown a video that was taken by Stuart Burbidge at 1 p.m. on the 28th of December 2019. The overall initial response on the day involved 8 RFS vehicles. By 6:30 p.m. in the evening of that first day, that is the 28th of December, there were 21 RFS appliances, 6 National Parks and Wildlife Service appliances and 5 Fire and Rescue New South Wales appliances at the scene. 2 fixed-wing bombing aircraft were also allocated to the fire in the early afternoon of 28 December. The firefighting response included some personnel and resources from Hume Forest Limited, or HFL, who owned the property. HFL operational staff are trained to RFS standards and participated under the control of the RFS in the firefighting response to this particular fire. In relation to the area of origin of East Ernie Creek fire, investigating police considered that this fire was caused by a lightning strike on the 31st of December 2019, and the origin was the Bogandeera Nature Reserve. This area is about 18 kilometres south-west of the township of Tumbarumba. On 5 January 2020, this fire merged with the Green Valley fire to the west. This fire then merged with the Duns Road fire on 10 January 2020. The East Ernie Creek fire was first observed by Rebecca Clark, resident of a property at the end of East Ernie Road. On 31 December 2019, Rebecca was preparing her property for the emerging Green Valley fire. She says that after lunch that day, she heard a loud clap of thunder and saw 2 lightning strikes to the east and northeast of her house. She then saw smoke rising from those 2 locations. These strikes were reported, but due to the location, the fire could not be accessed at that time. RFS efforts were focused on the emerging Duns Road fire. The fire continued to spread in an easterly direction until it merged with Duns Road. On the first day of the fire, 28 December 2019, the Duns Road fire spread 3 kilometres to the southeast, then 3 kilometres to the east, and finally a further 3 kilometres to the north. By 10 p.m, that night, the fire had burnt around 3,000 hectares. And Your Honour, I'll just have now displayed a fire progression map for that 24-hour period between 28 and 29 December 2019. And Your Honour can see in the top left-hand corner at Mark Dunn's Road. It was previously named the Westbrook Road fire at Tarcutta, and that shows the progression essentially in a 24-hour period between those 2 days. I'll have also shown now, if it's convenient, Your Honour, a photograph taken by Sergeant Brayson and that photograph was taken as part of the early development of the Duns Road fire. On 30 December, the Duns Road fire commenced a significant run to the southeast, Your Honour. The fire spread 19 kilometres in this one day. This is considered extreme and anomalous fire behaviour. Your Honour will see in the next map, fire progression map, taken for a period, or plotted for a period between the 30th and the 31st of December, the extent that the fire has run in that period between the 29th of December until the 31st of December. And you're going to see that it's taken a general run to the southeast from its area of origin. I'll then have displayed, if it's convenient, Your Honour, a line scan taken of the Duns Road fire on the evening of 30 December. And Your Honour will see again at that southeast portion of the fire front the intensity of the fire at that point in time. Your Honour, the next day, 31 December, the fire commenced an extraordinary run. In just over a day, as at the late afternoon of 31 December, the Duns Road fire spread approximately 80 kilometres in a southeast direction. Again, this is considered very extreme fire behaviour. And I'll just bring up now that next fire progression map for that 24-hour period between 30 and 31 December 2019. And Your Honour sees the significant distance that the fire's taken in a generally southeast direction from the previous fire progression map. On this day, that is the 31st of December, a significant storm with lightning impacted the area of the Duns Road fire. And as Your Honour will recall, on that same day there was lightning strikes throughout the southern area of New South Wales, which impacted the area around Badger Forest as well. Your Honour, there's a lightning strike map which depicts the extent of the lightning across that general area of southern New South Wales on the 31st of December 2019. And Your Honour sees the sheer number of lightning strikes recorded on the 31st of December in that southern area of New South Wales. And Your Honour can pick up Duns Road on the top left towards Tarcutta, and then as one moves down, Your Honour will come to Tumbarumba, and then again further down, further left of that to the south west is Green Valley, which Your Honour heard evidence about last week. And then if one moves to the east or to the right, Your Honour will see Bugtown and Wrights Hill Road and Shannon's Flat. I might also, if it's convenient, Your Honour, show two line scan maps for the 31st of December. These line scans show the significant shift from the progression of the fire from the southeast to a change in direction to the east by the end of the afternoon. Your Honour will see that by the intensity of the fire. I'll just go to the next one if that's convenient. Your Honour sees that the line scan shows fire intensity now on the eastern side. Your Honour will recall that this time period, that is the 30th to the 31st of December, was a very dangerous time across southern New South Wales. This day saw the significant spread and numerous tragic deaths in the Badger Fire and the Green Valley Fire. On 1 January 2020, the fire continued to burn strongly. On this day, the East Ernie Fire, the Doubtful Gap Trail Fire and the Adaminaby Complex Fire all ignited. On 3 January 2020, the fire progressed from Batlow to the Kosciuszko National Park, destroying much of the northern part of that national park. The fire caused significant damage to the Selwyn Snow Resort. On 4 January 2020, the Dundrove fire commenced another significant run of 11 kilometres to the southeast. On this day, the other surrounding fires all spread considerably. The East Ernie Creek Fire, Doubtful Gap Trail Fire and Green Valley Fire. It is considered to be extreme and anomalous for several fires in the same vicinity to spread significant distances, all in the one day and in multiple directions. The direction of the fire front changed, with the Duns Road fire running in both a north-east direction and an easterly direction. This change in direction heightened concern for the towns of Batlow and Wandalga. The experience of Michael Greenhow, captain of the Ernie Brigade and owner of a nearby property on 4 January, was as follows. And if it's convenient, Your Honour, I'll just read a passage from Mr Greenhow's statement that he provided to police on the 26th of June 2020. On Saturday, 4 January 2020, we received notification that we should expect severe fire weather throughout the weekend. This had been reported on since New Year's Eve. However, confirmation came Saturday morning. The concern was that our area would be threatened by not only the East Ernie Fire from the east, but also the Green Valley Bushfire to our west. Our major concern was from the Green Valley Fire coming towards us. On Saturday, the temperatures reached 45 degrees. The wind was up to about 40 kilometres an hour from the northwest. I spent the morning preparing my own property to be potentially impacted while monitoring brigade radio to monitor the spread of the fire. In the Ernie Valley, we had 2 firefighting appliances, both Cat 7 tankers, and 5 slip-ons that could be manned. About 1 p.m, East Ernie Fire broke its containment and was travelling south-east towards Wellaragon. Visibility was very poor throughout the day. There were brief periods where it would clear. They were operating helicopters in other areas, but nothing near here, other than the occasional spotter. The Green Valley Fire breached containment about 3 p.m. and reached Ernie about 5 p.m. We did our best to defend properties, however, we were heavily impacted by fire. Once the fire would pass through a property, we would all move to the next and do what we could to save homes and buildings. The East Ernie Creek Fire burnt down towards us. The Green Valley and East Ernie fires met at the back of the Clark's property. It only impacted the back of my property. As a result of the 2 fires, I lost about 1,300 acres. I don't believe the 2 fires met or joined on my property. I've never seen or experienced anything as intense as these fires in my entire life. We were all running on minimal sleep as we worked around the clock for the best part of a week fighting the fires. Our task was made more difficult as we had lost landline phones from New Year's Eve, electricity on the afternoon of the 4th of January, and we have very limited mobile service in Ernie. The mobile phone tower, which gives us some coverage, was also burnt on 4 January 2020. Communicating was extremely difficult, and receiving information to assist us in our preparations was also made more difficult. Your Honour, it was on this day, that is the 4th of January, as a result of that extreme fire behaviour, that David Harrison died at his friend's property at Wandalga. Between 6 and 8 January, the fire spread and a number of them merged, at least in part. On 10 January, the RFS authorised the East Ernie Fire as out on the basis that it had then merged with the Duns Road Fire. Here I just have displayed the RFS fire progression map for the period 10 to 11 January, which shows the merging of a number of fires in the area. Your Honour will see at about halfway down the map East Ernie Creek. And Your Honour sees that has then merged with the much larger Duns Road fire. And Your Honour can also see to the west of East Ernie Creek the Green Valley Talmalmo fire, which Your Honour received evidence on last week, merging with East Ernie Creek. And then to the southeast of Duns Road, Your Honour sees the Doubtful Gap Trail fire merging with Duns Road. And to the northeast of Doubtful Gap Trail, Your Honour sees the Adaminaby fire complex, which Your Honour will hear evidence later this week about, has also merged with Duns Road. Between 12 and 28 January 2020, the Duns Road fire continued to spread in various directions, around 1.5 to 2 kilometres each day. The progression of the fire then slowed significantly and was mapped as not spreading between 6 and 17 February 2020. The Duns Road fire was authorised by the RFS as out on the 15th of February 2020. And John, I'll just, for convenience, show the final RFS fire progression map, which shows a significant swathe of land in southern New South Wales that has been affected by the Duns Road fire, the Green Valley fire, the Adaminaby fire complex. Detective Sergeant Sean Clark attended the scene of the area of origin in the Ellerslie Ranges on 30 January 2020 with RFS fire investigator Scott Conlon. Both Detective Sergeant Clark and RFS investigator Scott Conlon have prepared expert reports for these proceedings, and the court will hear from them in due course. In particular, the court will hear from Detective Sergeant Clark regarding burn patterns at the scene and of a tree of interest in that general vicinity. Detective Clark found evidence of leaf freeze in a west to east direction, and the tree of interest had parallel marks in the trunk and protruding sap, which is considered evidence of sap boiling at the time of lightning impact. It is his expert opinion that the origin of the fire was a particular tree west of Mount Pleasant Creek in Ellerslie. RFS fire investigator Scott Conlon identified 3 significant lightning strikes and a particular tree that he considered was consistent with lightning. He also identified both macro and micro indicators of fire behaviour, both in the native vegetation and in the pine plantation. Mr. Collins shares the same expert opinion as to the cause and origin of the Duns Road fire as Detective Sergeant Sean Clark. Fire investigators have also concluded that the East Ernie Creek fire was caused by lightning on the 31st of December 2019, and the origin was the Burgundia Nature Reserve. I just had brought up a number of photographs relevant to the investigation into the cause of the Duns Road fire, and you'll see and will hear evidence in relation to particular marks on a particular tree in the general vicinity of a known lightning strike. We'll just move through to 2 more. Again, Your Honour, we'll hear some evidence from Sergeant Clark and Mr. Conlon in relation to these indicators and why these particular indicators are consistent with this particular tree being struck by lightning and burnt by it. And then finally, the last. Your Honour, that last map shows that the location of properties impacted by the Duns Road fire. Your Honour, the fire caused the destruction of 186 homes and 27 business premises. I'll just see if we can have that map just brought back up, which shows the extent of the homes damaged in that general area. Your Honour, the green dots represent structures destroyed or damaged by the Duns Road fire. And Your Honour, to the south west, or the bottom left-hand corner, Your Honour sees pink dots. They represent structures impacted by the Green Valley Fire. But Your Honour sees the extent of the devastation stretching from Tumbarumba right through to Batlow and beyond, to Wandalga. Your Honour, that concludes my opening remarks in relation to those two fires. It's convenient, Your Honour, I tender the brief for the Duns Road fire and the East Ernie Creek fire, and I'm instructed that they will become Exhibit 13, capital A.
Yes, thank you.
And for completeness, can I take the opportunity now to tender the brief in relation to the inquest into the death of David Harrison, which I'm instructed will become Exhibit 14.
Yes, thank you. That'll be Exhibit 14.
Your Honour, that concludes the procedural matters. If it's convenient, Your Honour, I propose now to call the first witness, which is Detective Senior Constable Peter Alexander, the officer in charge of the investigation.
Silence, please. Do you swear by Almighty God that the evidence you shall give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? If so, please say, I do.
I do.
Have a seat. Thank you.
Thank you.
Detective, would you please state your full name?
Peter Alexander, Detective Senior Constable from the Arson Unit.
And were you tasked as the officer in charge to investigate two fires, one known as the Duns Road fire and the other known as the East Ernie Creek fire?
Yes, I was, yes.
When were you first tasked to undertake those investigations, Detective?
I first originally attended when the fires took off in January the 1st. I went down there to Nowra at the base there, and then I was a week after that I was given that task of investigating the Duns Road fire.
And as part of your investigation, how many other investigators did you have at your disposal to assist with that investigation?
In relation to that, I had my unit, which would assist, where there's 15, but they had their own fires to look after as well. And I had a colleague from down in Wagga that assisted me with investigating the fire.
And who is that?
That was Detective Senior Constable Aaron Walker.
Thank you. Can I just ask you to set out briefly, if you wouldn't mind, please, your experience in relation to the investigation of fire, and in particular wildfire or bushfire?
I was quite new to the unit. I joined the unit in 2016. End of 2016. So I only had a year or so in relation to fighting the fires. I would suggest 18 months worth. Yeah.
Thank you. Now, as part of your investigation, did you conclude that in relation to the Duns Road fire, that the most likely cause of that fire was ignition by lightning?
Yes.
And in terms of the general area of origin, was that, and I'll come to a map in due course, within the Ellerslie Ranges?
Yeah, that's correct, yes.
Now, in relation to the East Ernie Creek fire, did your investigation conclude that that also was more probably than not caused by a lightning strike or strikes?
Strikes in the Bogandera National Park, yes.
On the 31st of December 2019?
That's correct, yes.
And in relation to the Duns Road fire, is it your conclusion as a result of your investigation that that fire is most likely have ignited on the late evening of the 27th of December 2019?
Yes, that's correct, yes.
Now, from your investigation, statements were taken from Mr. Bruce Angel and Mr. Stuart Burbidge in relation to observations they made of smoke plumes within the Ellerslie Ranges on the 28th of December 2019. From your investigations, were there any reports of smoke or fire behaviour in that period between the recording of the lightning strikes at 11:50 and 11:55 p.m. on the 27th and around midday on the 28th? Or
No, the first ones were around that 12 o'clock, and there was multiple around that time. Prior to that, there was nothing, no suggestion.
Now, that's about a period of about 12 hours between the recording of the lightning strikes and observations by local members of RFS brigades and property owners. Are you able to proffer any explanation as to why it took so long for observations to be made in that 12-hour period? Or
Yeah,
not?
definitely. The best thing I would be able to say is that when a lightning strikes, it doesn't just flame. A tree doesn't just flame, start beginning to ignite, and it's a smouldering fire, particularly if it comes in through the roots, and then it smoulders away. And then at that time of night, it's not the best conditions for fire. The sun's not out, there's dew points and all that sort of thing. So I would dare say that it would be, and not until that all clears up, the smouldering fire, then the conditions become worse in the morning, and then it ignites from there. That's my best interpretation of it anyway. Yeah.
Thank you. By the afternoon of the 28th of December, is it your understanding that RFS crews had attended the fire and were taking steps to suppress it?
Yes, definitely, yes.
Now, have you been up into that country where the ignition point is?
I have, yes.
How would you describe it?
Very difficult to get to. I was driving a four-wheel drive. I had to walk. We could only get a certain area before we had to get out on foot and then walk from there. The terrain is steep. There's fallen trees. Very hard to get to.
Are there fire trails? Or?
There are fire trails, only to a certain point. There weren't fire trails all the way up to where the ignition was. No, not at all.
Now, I might just have brought up, if it's convenient, the fire regression map, which was displayed as part of the opening, and it's page 45 of Detective Senior Constable Alexander's statement, and it's a fire progression map, detective, that covers that period 28 December to 29 December.
Yes.
Just have that brought up onto the screen, just for Her Honour's benefit and those who are appearing remotely.
No.
Now, is it your understanding that this fire, that is the Dundrove fire, in relation to this map, was mapped as having spread approximately 3 kilometres to the southeast, then approximately 3 kilometres to the east, and finally a further 3 kilometres to the north by about 10 p.m. On the 28th of December 2019?
Yeah, definitely. That's correct, yes.
And at that stage, is it your understanding from your investigations that the fire had burnt an area of approximately 3,000 hectares?
Yes.
In that short period of time? I'll then move, if it's convenient, to page 46 of your statement, Detective, which is the RFS fire progression map. Now, does this show the lightning recorded in the vicinity of Duns Road on the 27th of December? Do we see the lightning strike?
Yeah, there's a lightning strike in that area, Duns Road.
And that shows, again, in a magnified way, the extent of the fire by, in effect, the end of the 28th of December.
Yes,
So it's fanned out in a number of directions.
it did, yes, yeah, on that first day.
If we then go to the next fire progression map within your statement, page 47. Now, is it your understanding, again from your investigations, that on the 30th of December 2019, the Dundrove fire commenced a significant run to the southeast?
Yes, definitely, yeah, approximately 19 kilometres
Right.
on that day.
And is that spread of approximately 19 kilometres in a sort of 24-hour window, is that considered extreme and abnormal fire behaviour for one single day?
Definitely, and even, 19 is, and then as you'll go on to say, it's, even 19 kilometres is extreme, yes.
What we might do now is have the line scan brought up that was taken on the 30th of December 2019 at about 9:46, and Your Honour, this is found at page 48 of the detective's statement. Now this shows that the path of fire had taken over a 24-hour period. Now, does the scan show the ferocity of the fire front in that heading that southeast direction, and is that demonstrated by the intense orange glow that one sees in the southeast corner of the fire?
Yeah, definitely. That's what
Do you know how that technology operates?
It does. They when they go over with the plane, I've had it written. It's a thermal.
It's an infrared radiation detection,
it
is it not?
Yeah, and it just picks up the heat. It's mainly about the heat that it's producing, and you can tell by that photo where all the heat is coming from, and that's the front of the fire down to the southeast.
And by this stage, this is towards the end of the period, 30 December 2019, it's been going for about 3 days, 3 or 4 days. The next fire progression map, which is of interest, is found page 49 of your statement, Detective. And this is the fire progression map for the period midday 31 December to midday the 1st of January. Was there a further significant run on the 31st of December 2019?
Yeah, definitely. When they thought 19 kilometres was extreme, the next day was even further. Showed how fast that fire front was moving. At another 60 kilometres it travelled southeast.
Southeast again?
Yeah, southeast again.
And is it your understanding that in the period over perhaps 28 and a half hours, that this particular fire had spread approximately 80 kilometres in a southwest direction?
Yeah, that's right. From the start, 80 kilometres that I'd travelled by then. Yeah.
Do you consider that that is an extraordinarily extreme and anomalous behaviour?
Yeah, most definitely. As I said, if they thought 19 kilometres was extreme, they was no way could they prepare for a 60 kilometres the next day.
And at this time, towards the end of 2019, New Year's Eve, do you have any appreciation as to what the RFS's strategy was in relation to this particular fire? Was it by this stage property protection?
Property protection and contain as best they can. But definitely property protection by that stage. That's all they were doing,
I'll go now to the next map within your statement, page 50, which part of which was displayed as part of the opening for Her Honour. Can you just explain what we see in relation to this particular map?
Yeah, they're the lightning strikes on that day.
This is just for one day, is it?
That's over the period of the that night. Yeah, the 24-hour period. The lightning strikes, and as you can see from that map, that's quite extreme.
I don't wish to put you on the spot, but do you have any appreciation as to how many strikes were recorded in that 24-hour period between 31 December and 1 January 2020?
Not off the top of my head. I apologise for that. No, but I could. I haven't got that figure in front of me, but I can just see from the map that they're hundreds.
A significant
Yeah.
Number of lightning strikes were recorded
Yeah.
in a band across southeastern New South Wales, it seems. The next map within your statement I opened on, page 51, which shows a second line scan. Now, does this depict the fire? Firstly, does this show that the fire front has changed from heading in a southeast direction to heading in an east direction?
It does, and I think
So there's two. So that's the first one. I'll come to the second one in a moment. The first one shows it heading in a southeast direction at 3 p.m. on the 31st. And then if we then move to the next one, on the following page, at page 52, do we see then that, again, in a very short period of time, there's been a massive shift where the fire is now heading in a generally easterly direction.
And that's it shows through that whole period the unpredictable of the fire and the weather at that time. It was just very hard to predict because I think the fire generates its own weather system as well, which I wouldn't go into expertly, but that's my knowledge I have of it. And yeah, you can tell the difference just in a 24-hour period. It just changed dramatically and goes from one side of the fire front to the other.
Do you know whether that was consistent with a wind shift, such that the winds have swung around from a northwest direction to a more westerly direction?
There was a wind shift, but yeah, there was. I don't know if it was a predicted wind shift as much as I said. I think they believed it was coming down, travelling in one direction, and then there was a wind shift, definitely, to have that extreme change. But I think the fire itself also generates its own system.
Now, we're at that period about New Year's Day, 2020, the 1st of January.
Yep.
Were there a number of other fires ignited at about that time in and around the general area we're concerned with as part of the Dundrove fire progression?
Yeah. No. Yep.
And was one of those the East Ernie Creek fire?
It was, yes.
That, from your investigations, and as you said earlier in your evidence today, ignited late afternoon on the 31st of December 2019.
Yes, that's correct.
And that was some smoke was observed in relation to that fire, was it not, by Ms. Rebecca Clark?
Ms. Clark, yes.
And Mr. Craig Clothier?
Yes.
Now, were there also ignitions around the Doubtful Gap trail?
Yeah, there was.
And also at Adaminaby?
Yes.
Your Honour, I might have brought up, if it's convenient, page 53 of the detective statement, which shows a number of those other emerging fires. And this is an RFS fire progression for 12 a.m. on the 1st of January 2020 to the 2nd of January 2020. Now, obviously, the Green Valley Talmamo fire had already been underway for a few days, as everyone knows from last week's inquiry.
Yes.
Now, we've got the East Ernie Creek fire, which is south of Tumbarumba, north of Tooma, and Doubtful Gap Trail to the southeast, and then sort of bearing due east, we've got the area around Adaminaby.
Yes.
Now, in terms of the progression of those fires, did they develop over a period of time such that they ultimately merged with the Duns Road fire?
Yes, they did, yeah.
And what I'd like to deal with is that particular progression on the 4th of January 2020. Now, was that considered another significant day of abnormal fire behaviour?
It was, yes, another one. They became frequent in that period, but there was another run.
And was that run in relation to the Duns Road fire a run from the where it ran from the southeast to a sort of a east-southeasterly direction and spreading it about 8 to 24 kilometres?
Yes, that's right.
In a single day?
Yeah,
And then swung around to where there was fire behaviour, or spread to the northeast.
yeah, that's correct. Yeah, it was going in two directions.
And do we see that in the fire progression map found at page 55 of your statement?
Yep.
Just have that displayed, Detective. Now, is it your understanding from your investigations that on the 4th of January 2020, Duns Road, Doubtful Gap Trail, Adaminaby Complex, East Ernie Creek and Green Valley fires commenced significant runs, firstly, as I said a moment ago, to the southeast and east-southeast before parts of those fires subsequently spread to the northeast?
Yeah.
Is it, in your opinion, considered extreme and abnormal behaviour for several fires in the same vicinity to spread distances 8 to 24 kilometres in multiple directions on a single day?
Oh, yeah, definitely. Yes.
And again, from your experience investigating fire, as a result of the merging of those other fires, does that provide very high intensity fire in those areas where there's been a merging of more than one fire?
Yeah. Oh, yes, definitely. When they merge, or when everything becomes hotter, everything becomes more extreme. Yeah.
Now, again, just sticking, if we may, with the 4th of January 2020, is it your understanding that the Duns Road fire was mapped as spreading approximately 11 kilometres to the southeast?
The southeast, yes.
And then it was then mapped merging with the Doubtful Gap Trail fire at about that time?
Yep, that's correct.
And we see that there. Is it also your understanding from your investigations that the Doubtful Gap Trail fire was mapped as having spread approximately 5 kilometres to the southeast prior to its heel merging with the head of the Duns Road fire?
Yeah, that's correct.
Again, and tell me if you can't remember this, is it your understanding that the merged Duns Road and Doubtful Gap Trail fires continue to spread a further 9.5 kilometres to the southeast in a 24-hour period?
Yeah, I believe they kept going. Yeah, once they had merged, they kept going southeast. Yes.
From your investigations, did portions of the northern flank of the Duns Road fire spread distances of between 8 and 20 kilometres to the northeast?
Yes. Yeah. Up further up near the Batlow and the Talbingo and that area, or further up. Are you referring to?
By the end of the 4th of January 2020, Detective, did the direction of the fire front, was it now running both a northeast direction and an easterly direction?
Yeah, that's correct. Obviously a little bit slower than from the southeast and the east, but it was spreading in all directions, yeah.
And on the 4th of January 2020, as a result of that extreme and anomalous fire behaviour, the fact that the front was running in two directions, a northeast and an easterly direction, were there concerns for the towns and populations located in its path, including Batlow and Wandalga on that day?
Yeah, that's definitely, yeah, that's correct. And the emergency warnings were out there for that purpose, yeah.
And I'll come to some of those warnings in the lead up to the 4th of January 2020 shortly. And then I might just show, Your Honour, the fire progression map which is for the 24-hour period between the 10th of January and the 11th of January 2020. Again, just to demonstrate that in that 7 or 8 day period, the extent of the fire's progression, and that's page 57. Detective, does that show the merger of those other fires being Doubtful Gap Trail Fire, Green Valley, Talmalmo, East Ernie Creek and the Adaminaby Complex?
Yeah, it does. Yes.
And is it your understanding from your investigations that the merger of those fires with the Duns Road fire occurred around about the 10th of January 2020?
Yes, 10th of January, yes, that's correct.
Thereafter, was there much progression of the fire until it was declared out on the 15th of February 2020?
No, not as clearly, not as much as what had occurred. And there was a sort of, wouldn't say it burned itself out, but it began to, didn't travel as far.
And
after merging.
we might just show the final RFS map, which is found at page 60 of your statement as detective, which shows the final extent of the Duns Road fire on the 16th of February 2020.
Yeah.
We'll just...
Yeah, so you can see the progression. Although it did continue to progress, it wasn't as extreme as what it had been doing.
Now, can I just deal with now? I won't go into any great detail, cause and origin, because Detective Sean Clark and Mr. Conlon will be called. And you've dealt with cause and origin both in your statement, but at the outset of your evidence this morning, you've given evidence as to lightning being the cause of both ignitions and general areas of origin we can come to with those witnesses in due course. Now, in relation to David Harrison, is it your understanding from your investigation that he passed on the 4th of January 2020?
Yes, that's correct.
And as a result of your investigations, was the direct cause of David Harrison's death the combined effects of methamphetamine use and hyperthermia?
Yes, that's right.
Now, when you came to investigate Mr. Harrison's death, were you able to obtain mobile phone records that demonstrated that he had received a number of emergency warnings?
I did, yes.
In the lead up to the 4th of January 2020?
Yeah, yes, definitely. He received a few.
And if you need to refer to your notes, please do so, Detective. And in the relevant part of this aspect of your evidence is found at page 97. As at the 2nd of January 2020, from your investigations, was Mr. Harrison at a property managed by his old school friend Jeff Purcell?
Yes. Yeah.
And that at somewhere between 2:40 p.m. and 3 p.m. on the 2nd of January 2020, does your investigation reveal that an emergency warning message from RFS advising Batlow Wandalga residents to leave now was received by Mr. Harrison's mobile phone?
And it was received.
Right, and it was received?
Yes.
Again, from your investigations, did they reveal that on the 3rd of January 2020, Mr Harrison received further emergency messages or warnings from RFS, again advising Batlow Wandalga residents to seek shelter now?
Yes.
And,
Yes.
and was that, from your investigations, received by Mr Harrison's mobile telephone?
Yes.
And again, from your investigations, were there further emergency warning messages sent from the RFS that were received by Mr Harrison's mobile telephone on the 4th of January 2020
Yes.
to seek shelter as the fire arrives?
Yes, that's correct. Yeah.
From your investigations, do you know why it was that Mr Harrison and his friend Mr Purcell decided to stay at Mr Purcell's property, notwithstanding those emergency warnings leading up until the 4th of January 2020?
Yeah, to my knowledge, they remained on obviously to protect property. Jeff Purcell is a member of the RFS. They stayed on his property to protect the property and also the cattle that they have. In previous years, they have fought grass fires and bushfires that have come through and come onto the property, and they were successful in doing that without any harm. And they were of the belief they could do the same thing that year.
And in summary, where was Mr Harrison? Well, I'll withdraw that. Did Mr Purcell find Mr Harrison in a state that required medical assistance?
He did, yes.
After having been preparing the property for the ensuing fire?
The property had entered the fire had entered the property up on the far, I think, western side, and it had encroached on his property. David was left behind to fill up the tank, and Jeff went out to fight the fire, and on his return.
When you say the tank, that on the property there was a vehicle that had a water tank which they were using to put out spot fires?
Yeah, that's correct, yeah.
And that, picking up what you just said a moment ago, Mr Purcell found David where?
Found him slumped on the step, and he got him he left him on the step, and when he got back he was in the ute, just slumped in the ute.
And from your analysis of the evidence as a result of your investigation, what did Mr Purcell then do?
He got David in the car properly, and then he drove as fast as he could towards Tumut for medical assistance. And
did he make a call en route towards Tumut, to your recollection, or not, to any person?
No, he didn't. I think he was trying to, but I think he was lucky enough to come across or not. But police passed him as he was trying to get there, and I think he was trying to make a call at that stage, but not getting through.
And was he able to, in effect, wave down some New South Wales police officers?
Yes, he did, yeah.
And what, to your understanding, then happened?
Jeff pulled over, the police got out, got David out of the vehicle, saw that he was not responsive, and began CPR. At that time, another, I think, forestry unit came by, and they had to go and try and retrieve a
defibrillator?
Defib machine. And then ambulance were called as well. And then by the time they all got there and began working on David, trying to revive him, they couldn't, unfortunately.
Thank you, Detective. Can I just deal now, finally, if I may, with the number of structures that were impacted Firstly, as a result of the Dundrove fire. From your investigation, did that fire cause the destruction of 186 homes?
Yes, it did, yeah.
The destruction of 27 business premises?
Yes.
The destruction of 572 outbuildings? Minor to moderate damage to another 48 homes? 13 commercial properties and 178 outbuildings. Was the area that was burnt in the order of about 333,940 hectares?
Yes. That's for the Duns Road fire, yeah.
And again, if you don't know this, please say so, but do you know how many boundary fences may have been impacted by this particular fire or not?
I don't off the top of my head, sorry. I did have I know it's not in kilometres, but I know it was in the range of $56 million worth of damage.
And in relation to livestock losses, do you have a figure in relation to?
Not off the top of my head, and I think it was in the thousands. So.
And then in relation to the East Ernie Creek fire, Detective, did that burn an area of about 407 hectares?
Yes, it did, yeah.
And in relation to that fire, to your understanding, was there only one home that was destroyed as a result of that fire?
Yeah, before it merged, yes.
Your Honour, that concludes my examination of Detective Alexander. There may be some questions from Mr. Newton.
Yes, Mr. Newton, do you have any questions?
No questions, Your Honour.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Detective. You're excused for now.
Thank you. Your Honour, could I ask for a short adjournment? We need to do some testing with the next two witnesses, and it may be that it's convenient to take the morning adjournment now.
We'll do that and we'll resume at 11:35.
Please, Your Honour.
Thank you.
Silence, please, all stand. This coroner's court is temporarily adjourned.
Your Honour, the next witness is Detective Sergeant Sean Clark, who is in the virtual waiting room and can be called as a witness. I call Detective Sergeant Sean Clark.
Detective, can you see and hear us?
Your Honour, yes, I can.
Thank you. You'll hear from the court officer now.
Detective Clark, would you like to take the religious oath or the affirmation?
Yeah, it's fine.
The religious oath? Yes?
Yes,
Thank you. Silence, please. Do you swear by Almighty God that the evidence you shall give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? If so, please say, I do.
I do.
Thank you.
Detective, would you please state your full name?
Sean Anthony Clark, Clark spelled C-L-A-R-K-E.
And are you a Detective Sergeant with the New South Wales Police stationed at Wagga Wagga?
That's correct.
And are you attached to the crime scene unit there in Wagga?
Yes,
Did you undertake an investigation into the cause and origin of a fire known as the Dundrove fire?
yes, I did.
And have you also undertaken an investigation into the cause and origin of a fire known as the East Ernie Creek fire?
Yes,
And as a result of those investigations, have you produced two statements, the first dated the 11th of November 2020 in relation to the cause and origin of the Dundrove fire?
yes,
And then did you also complete an expert statement dated the 24th of November 2020 in relation to the cause and origin of the East Ernie Creek fire?
yes.
What I propose to do this morning, Detective Sergeant, is to deal firstly with the Dundrove fire, and at the conclusion of that I'll then move into your investigation into the cause and origin of the East Ernie Creek fire. Detective, do you have a copy of each of those statements with you today?
I do.
Are there any matters that you wish to correct or not?
There was an indication of attachment 6 in the East Orney fire, I believe.
Yes.
That attachment is the same as attachment 5. So 5 and 6 are interchangeable. There shouldn't be an attachment 6.
And that relates to the East Ernie Creek fire?
Yes, it does.
Apart from that matter, do you otherwise adhere to the opinions that you've expressed throughout each of those two expert statements?
Yes.
Dealing now, if I may, with the Dundrove fire, can I ask you in general terms what your methodology was in relation to the investigation of the cause and origin of that fire?
Essentially, was gaining information, obtaining information by a number of different sources, which included obviously lightning strike data, information from eyewitnesses, first attack crews, that type of information, and forming an idea as to where the fire in general may have started. From there, attending, both myself and John, sorry, my name's Jason, but one from the Rural Fire Service, both attended the area on a particular date and made an assessment and came to a same opinion that basically the fire started at a set location.
Was that John Baker of the?
Yes, sorry, it was Mr. Baker, John Baker.
Who is a RFS fire investigator, is he not? All right. Now, did you undertake a site visit of that general area of origin where it was thought the ignition point was for the Dundrove fire?
Yes, I did.
And did you go out on more than one occasion?
I did.
And do you recall the date that you first went out to that general area of origin in relation to the Dundrove fire?
I believe it was a week before. May have been the.
Did you encounter any difficulties in terms of accessing the fireground on that occasion?
The fireground itself The access was not a problem, but to actually get to the area I wanted to get to, it's pretty rugged terrain. It's four-wheel drive only. And where the area of origin or the point of origin where we determined it was, it's quite hazardous and rough country.
Now, to enable you to have a general understanding of a potential area of origin, did you rely upon some of the eyewitness accounts provided by local community members such as Bruce Angel?
His statement was one I relied on, yes.
And Stuart Burbidge?
Yes.
Now, you mentioned obtaining information in relation to lightning strike data. Who did you obtain that information from, Detective Sergeant?
RFS.
The RFS?
Yep.
And to your understanding, did they obtain that lightning strike data from an organisation known as GPATS based in the ACT?
I believe that's correct, yes.
Do you know what the level of accuracy is in relation to that lightning strike data in terms of metres or not?
Don't quote me. I thought it was around about 300 metres.
And in terms of its, is it accurate to a level of about 95% to your understanding or not? In terms of pinpointing a particular GPS location as a result of a lightning strike?
I can't speak to its absolute accuracy. However, from the information I saw of it, it seemed quite accurate.
What I might do is just have displayed attachment 1, Detective Sergeant, to your statement in relation to Duns Road. It's page 270-13. Where was the general area of origin thought to be as you commenced your investigation into the cause and origin of this particular fire?
Originally, I believe it was in the Ellerslie State Forest.
And where does that, for those who aren't familiar with that area of southern New South Wales, where does the Ellerslie Ranges sit, generally speaking?
Generally, they're east of Tarcutta, approximately 5 to 10 kilometres east of Tarcutta. Small township, which is obviously east of Wagga.
And you've already described part of the terrain from your site visit as being rugged. Was part of the general area of origin occupied by a pine plantation or not?
Yes, it was.
And was that a privately owned pine plantation managed by an organisation known as Hume Forestry Limited? Hume Forests Limited? Now, I might then just bring up an RFS map, which is attachment 2, Detective Sergeant, to your statement, which is found at page 270-18. And I'll just see if we can magnify it slightly so it's a little easier to see. Now, you've identified Tarcutta in your evidence a moment ago, and we see that that sits on the outer edges of this map on the left-hand side or the western side. And then there's a burn on the bottom of the attachment in a southerly location. And then we move up and you see Ellerslie, which is about halfway down attachment 2, slightly to the east of some lightning strikes. Now, do I understand correctly, Detective Sergeant, that these red pinpoints depict lightning strike recorded in this general area?
Yes.
Now, one sees between Ellerslie and Tarcutta, in that area sort of north of the O'Byrne Ellerslie Trail, 3 red markers indicating lightning strikes, correct?
That's correct.
Now, are these lightning strikes that were recorded on the 27th of December 2019?
Yes, they all were.
And do we see that there are 2 that were recorded on that date at 23:55, that is 11:55 p.m,
Yes,
and a further lightning strike recorded at 23:50, that is 11:50 p.m.
yes,
Now, if we then go to your next attachment, if I may, Detective Sergeant, which is attachment number 3, page 27019, one sees that those 3 particular lightning strike marks have been identified with the numbers 1, 2 and 3. Do you see that?
that's correct.
What is what was the purpose, to your understanding, of marking each of those lightning strikes with a number?
They were areas of interest,
Right.
locations for examination.
And were they areas of interest having regard to the observations made firstly by individuals such as Mr. Bruce Angel and Mr. Scott Burbidge,
Yes,
and also from information received from first responders to the fire scene?
that's correct.
Now, as part of your investigation into the cause and origin of this particular fire, that is Duns Road, were you able to exclude one or more of those lightning strikes as a potential ignition point?
Yes,
And which were the ones that were excluded?
numbers 2 and 3.
And I take it they were determined to be outside the area of fire?
Yes.
And why was that?
The part of the initial observations of the ground crews and the spread of the fires recorded.
Do I take it then that as a result of that analysis, you and your RFS colleague, Mr. Baker, were looking at a possible area of origin around the lightning strike recorded and numbered number 1 in that diagram?
That's correct.
Now, we then go to attachment 4, Detective Sergeant, which is page 270-22. Just have that displayed. (270) page or -22. Thank you. Do you see that on the screen, Detective Sergeant?
Yes, I do.
Now, again, this is another RFS map. Does this depict the initial ground crew observations and the recorded lightning strike within that area that we were discussing a moment ago on the 27th of December?
Yes, it does.
And the lightning strike that's recorded in this attachment number 4, does that correspond with the lightning strike recorded and marked number 1 in the previous attachment,
Yes, it does.
which is the lightning strike recorded on the 27th of December at 11:50 p.m?
Yes.
And we'll just go then to the next attachment for completeness, which is attachment number 5. And does that show the progression of the fire the following day, the 28th of December 2019?
Yes, it does.
Right. And is it your understanding that the fire spread in a generally southeast easterly direction by that time.
That's correct.
Now, you mentioned that you had visited the fire ground. Did you undertake any aerial inspection at all of the fire ground around the area of origin?
Aerial inspections?
Yes.
No, I didn't personally.
Now, I think your evidence is that you inspected the likely area of origin on 2 occasions.
Yes.
In terms of the site visits that you made, was there a particular methodology that you deployed in relation to try and track a specific area of origin for this fire?
Principally, I look at fire indicators, which there are micro indicators and then what we call macro indicators. Micro indicators are small things on the ground. There's a larger picture which you try and paint. At that particular area, given the terrain, you're starting to look, the fires burn upwards and focus your area around evidence that you see at the scene. So it's systematic. So you look at it and, okay, it hasn't burnt there, it's burnt there. There's indicators that it's going in this direction. So I try and focus on using basic fire indicator information that's at the scene as to where it may be and track back to the origin.
Now, do I understand correctly that when you've attended the site visit, you had the GPS coordinates for the lightning strike recorded at 11:50
right.
p.m. on the 27th of December?
Yes.
Now, as part of your ground-based inspection, did you identify any vegetation that may have been impacted by a lightning strike?
Yes.
And what I might do is have displayed photograph number 5, Detective Sergeant, which is found at page 270-7. Now, you see there a photograph of a charred tree, and this photograph is taken facing generally northeast. What was it about this particular tree that led you to the conclusion that it was struck by lightning? And if you need to have displayed other photographs contained within your statement, then please identify those and I'll have those brought up onto the screen.
That particular tree was void of any further vegetation. There's no leaves left on that particular tree. And there were scar marks, parallel scar marks on the tree itself. If you go to
Photograph 7.
photograph 7, 270/9.
Thank you. Now, this is a photograph, again, facing north, and it's of the same tree that we just saw a moment ago, which was photograph number 5, correct?
That's right. Just at the base of the tree. And
now,
one of the other things that indicate we identified, or John Baker and I both identified, were sap, which looks to like extruded from inside the actual tree itself. That was exclusive to that particular tree. No one of the other trees in the vicinity had that effect.
And do we see that marked by the white line and arrowhead at two places on that base of that trunk?
You can see that basically what that white line is, that's extruded sap coming out of the tree itself.
And
following from that, there was, as I said,
sorry to cut you off, Detective Sergeant, but just so that Her Honour understands clearly, what is it about that precipitated sap that is consistent with a tree being struck by lightning?
Well, when a tree gets struck by lightning, a number of things can happen. my reading, understanding of it, and from speaking with John Baker as well, the tree can explode, which quite often does happen, or it can be hit in such a way as to basically internally fry the contents of the tree itself, and superheat it. So it superheats the internal contents of the tree and they extrude out. And on this particular occasion, that's what I think has actually happened. What may have happened in conjunction with that is that one of the limbs, and I wasn't able to determine whether or not one of the limbs may have fallen off, and that in itself has initiated a fire in a later stage. Couldn't tell. But basically, I was very comfortable with the idea that this was the actual tree that had been struck by lightning.
Thank you. Detective Sergeant, you mentioned earlier in your evidence parallel marks or cracks.
Yes.
That may be consistent with damage caused by a lightning strike. Do we see those parallel marks clearly in any of the photographs that you've attached to your report?
You go to photograph 10.
Thank you. Page 270-12. And again, this is a photograph, is it not, of the same tree that we've been looking at previously?
Yes, it is.
And have you marked, well, I withdraw that, have you firstly marked the precipitated sap extruding from particular cracks or splits in the trunk?
Yes.
And although unmarked, does one see, running from top to bottom of the photograph, a number of loosely parallel markings within that tree trunk?
Yes, there is.
And what significance, if any, attaches to those parallel-like marks in that tree trunk in relation to it being consistent with lightning strike?
Often when lightning strikes a tree, they will scar it and mark it. They appear, as I said, unique to that particular tree, and together with the other information with the extruded sap, the location of the tree itself and with the GPS and the lightning strike itself, and yes, that was what I was particularly interested.
As a result of your investigations, including your ground-based examination, did you come to the conclusion that more probably than not, the ignition of the Dundrove fire was a result of a lightning strike on this particular tree?
Yes.
And were you able to use GPS coordinates as to the location of that tree?
Yes.
And having regard to the GPS coordinates of that particular tree, together with the GPS coordinates of the recorded lightning strike at 11:55 p.m, I think it was. Or was it 50? 11:50, sorry, my apologies, 11:50 p.m. Did those two coordinates come within an area of about 35 metres of each other?
I believe so, yes, they did, yes.
And notwithstanding that they weren't 100% the same, you formed the view that the most likely cause of the ignition was this particular tree as a result of lightning strike.
Yes.
Now, that then gave you a specific area of origin, did it not?
Yes.
As part of your analysis, did you exclude other possible causes of ignition for the Dundrove fire?
Yes, I did.
And were you comfortably satisfied that there were no other potential causes for this ignition, such as human activity?
I saw no evidence of human activity or any other activity, for example, or no power lines or anything like that of that particular nature. Nothing like that in the location.
Thank you, Detective Sergeant. What I propose to do now is to deal with your investigation into the cause and origin of the East Ernie Creek fire. Now, again, did you come to the conclusion that the most likely cause of the East Ernie Creek fire was lightning strike?
Yes.
And were you, in relation to this particular fire, able to identify a specific or actual point of origin or not?
I think I identified a more likely. I wouldn't say a specific. I cannot be as specific as I was for the Dundrove fire, but there is a couple of lightning strikes which I've indicated as one on one of my attachments, which I believe is the more likely who've initiated the fire.
And we'll come to those shortly. Again, did you, as part of your investigation, rely upon eyewitness accounts from local community members?
Yes.
And did that include obtaining information from Rebecca Clark, who observed, well, firstly, heard two separate lightning strikes in the Boganderra Nature Reserve on the afternoon of the 31st of December 2019?
Yes.
And then observed columns of smoke in that same general area subsequent to experiencing those two lightning strikes?
Yes.
Did you also obtain information from Mr. Mike Greenhall, who again was a local community member who made observations of smoke in that general area where there were recorded lightning strikes?
That's correct. It was information that was gathered from a statement I'd taken from him, yes.
And also, did you obtain information from police statements taken from Craig Clothier?
Yes, I did, but I actually attended the scene with Craig Clothier at a later date.
What I might do is firstly bring up attachment 1A, if I may, Detective Sergeant, which is a satellite image of the Boganderra Nature Reserve, where it was thought that this fire commenced within. And again, could you just provide a general overview as to where the Boganderra Nature Reserve sits within that area of southern or southeastern New South Wales?
The area is very close to the border with Victoria. The Murray River is not far south of where the location is. It's approximately 20 to 30 kilometres, 20 kilometres south of Tumbarumba.
Okay, well, we see in that satellite image, do we not, in the northern reaches of the area, the top of the image, the township of Tumbarumba, and then to the northwest of Boganderra Nature Reserve we have Mundaroo, and then, as you indicated in your evidence a moment ago, to the south we have the border between New South Wales and Victoria, and we see Ernie there in the bottom left-hand corner, do we not? Okay. Now, if we then move to the next attachment, which is 1B, Detective Sergeant, page 298-16, do we see marked with a blue marker Rebecca Clark's property?
Yes.
And do you know approximately how many kilometres Ms Clark's property is from the general area of origin for this specific fire or not?
It's within 4 to 5 kilometres.
Thank you. All right. Now, I have just brought up now your attachment to Detective Sergeant, which is page 298-18. Now, again, is this an RFS map which shows lightning strikes recorded in that general area we're discussing around the Boganderra Nature Reserve on the afternoon of 31 December 2019?
Yes.
And the lightning strike data to your understanding, was that recorded by the GPATS organisation in the ACT?
Yes.
Now, there are a number of lightning strikes recorded that afternoon on the 31st of December 2019. I'll then go, before I move to the next attachment, it's hard to discern, but can you identify Rebecca Clark's property? Is it marked with a cross, and it's for a lightning strike nearby recorded on the 31st of December at about 5:37:25 p.m?
That's it.
Okay. Now, if we then go to the next attachment, attachment number 3, page 298-19, the red marker in the bottom left-hand corner, that's Rebecca Clark's homestead, is it not?
Yes, it is.
And is the property pronounced Newcastle Park or not?
Yes, I'll take it. That'll do.
Apologies to the Clark family if I've mispronounced it. Now, there are a number of blue markers recorded on this satellite image sitting within the Bogandera Nature Reserve, again for the 31st of December 2019. Are there any particular lightning strikes that may be more likely than not the cause of the origin of this particular fire, or not?
The fire, which have you got attachment 5 there?
Yes, I'll have that brought up, and that's page 298-21. And I'll just see if we can have that magnified. Do I apprehend that there are obviously 3 markers? There's one of the markers is the Clark property in the bottom
Yes.
left-hand corner, the south-western section of the image. There's a red marker marked East Ernie,
Yes.
and then there's another red marker marked, is it pronounced Althorpe? Althorpe 1.
Yep.
Now, do I understand that there were lightning strikes recorded near those 2 red markers?
Yes, there was. They're 2 separate fires.
Okay. Can we just deal with the East Ernie
Sure.
one first? What investigations did you undertake that revealed that there may have been an ignition point in that general area marked East Ernie in attachment number 5?
Initially, the eyewitness reports of Rebecca Clark, who indicated that they had seen 2 strikes in those locations from their homestead.
Yes.
The GPS, there was information from the witnesses, and other witnesses, then Craig Clodier may have been one of those witnesses who actually saw a similar thing to Rebecca, a similar by Rebecca Clark. They attended an area which I think we would call the Althorpe area, initially after seeing those strikes and seeing some smoke. And from there on, there was obviously the satellite data. The Althorpe fire actually had ignited and was in the process of being extinguished. It was extinguished over a couple of days. The East Ernie fire wasn't more or less discovered till some time afterwards.
And in relation to the Althorpe fire, was part of your investigation in relation to that ignition point based on information obtained from Mr. Craig Clodier?
Yes, it was.
And did he live in a property not too far from that location marked red?
That's correct.
Did you undertake...
No, Craig, he lived further south of Neutral Park is. He wasn't near the Althorpe fire where it's indicated there.
Thank you. Were you able to undertake a ground-based inspection within the Burgundera Nature Reserve or not?
Yes, I did.
And on how many occasions did you go out to the fire ground, Detective Sergeant?
A couple of times. I've gone out there and actually had a look. I initially went out there based on information that I had at the time. However, Craig Clothier, information that Craig had supplied in the statement wasn't available to me at the time, and I returned to the scene with him later, and from there we sort of worked around the area of origin, which is a lot closer.
How would you describe the terrain that you traversed? And firstly, were you able to access it by four-wheel drive or not?
Initially from the what would be the western side of the Burgundera, that is by foot only. I quite frankly wouldn't take a horse in there. It's that rough. It's pretty rugged terrain, and it's actually dangerous to stand in some of the areas. It's quite rugged. And from that side, it's rugged. But from the eastern side, which was where I went with Craig, it's vehicular access along that area. You can, from the image in 298.21, you can see it's actually been pasture improved. You can access it quite clearly along that side.
Was that image
298.21?
And that was the area around, is it Althorpe?
Yes, Althorpe and south of that, East Ernie, where we indicated on the attachment as well. Right. You can access that by road.
So you could access that by vehicle. If we just bring up photograph number 1, Detective Sergeant, which is page 298-7, there's a black arrow. Does that depict the area that you walked into to undertake your ground-based inspection?
Yes, that was the area I initially walked into to examine. And
were you, like you're able to do with the Duns Road fire, identified macro and or micro fire indicators that led you to a specific area of origin or not?
No, not with that. The terrain was extremely difficult. The fire looked like it may have burnt in and out. It looked like there was no way I could actually specifically identify any particular area there.
Thank you, Detective Sergeant. Do I understand then correctly that in terms of the fire's area of origin, you came to the conclusion that it was within the Burgundera Nature Reserve and within proximity of one of 3 GPAT lightning strikes which we've seen identified in attachment 5?
Yes.
Beyond that, it was too difficult to identify a specific or actual point of origin?
Yes, it was.
I take it you were unable to identify any particular trees that may have been struck by lightning in that area?
Not on this occasion, no.
Thank you, Detective Sergeant Clark. They are my questions. Mr. Newton may have some questions for you.
Mr. Newton.
No questions, Your Honour.
Thanks very much, Detective. Excuse
Thank you, Ron.
Your Honour, that concludes the evidence for today. Tomorrow, RFS fire investigator Scott Conlon will be called at 10 a.m. Then I will make some preliminary closing remarks in relation to the cause and origin of the Duns Road fire and the East Ernie Creek fire. And then at the end of those remarks, the inquest into the death of David Harrison will be opened. And Mr. Jeff Purcell, David's good friend, will be called to give evidence, followed by a family statement.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Castleton. We'll adjourn today and resume at 10 a.m. tomorrow morning.
Please the court.